Hello and welcome to this Axosoft in-depth video. This video is about creating your first project in Axosoft. And so it will be slower. I will take my time here and I'll try to go through as many of the details that you'll likely encounter when you're creating your first project. To give you a brief summary of what we'll cover today, I will talk about creating the actual project folder in Axosoft, creating an item in Axosoft, and then how to create other items. So creating items manually, importing them via a spreadsheet. I will be going over those examples in this video. We'll go through what you do after you create your project folder, and we'll talk about grooming your backlog. What does it mean to groom your backlog in Axosoft? What are some of your options? And then once you do have a groomed backlog, how can you use that to plan your upcoming releases, your upcoming iterations? So that gets us to creating releases, using the release planner, and then finally getting to work. So once a release is planned, what do your team members do on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like for them? And then for you, if you're someone who cares about how long something will take before it is expected to ship, so you're looking for that burn down chart data, you're looking for the velocity, you're looking for that projected ship date, we'll talk about all the components that you need in order to get your burn down chart to show some accurate data based off of the work that your team members have been logging and doing. So all of that will be contained in this video, and today's example will be based off of an agile example. And so we will be using the idea of planning releases. Our releases will be in sprints, they're 2 weeks long, and I'll try to include just some best practices as I've seen them throughout the video. But let's get started, we might as well dive into it. So here you should see the default data that I have here in Axosoft. So I just created a new account, finished up a trial, I had loaded some sample data, and what I want to do next is actually create my first project folder, something that I'll be using for production. And so what I'm going to do here is here I am in the Organize panel, and I'm going to create my first project folder. And just to keep with the theme here, I'll call this project folder Star Killer. And I'm going to uncheck this box here. So this box to also add a release down in the releases pane with the same name. I don't want to do that because in my case, in my example, I will be purposely creating my releases, on a 2-week iterations. That's this example today. You may decide that you do want to name a release and call it your product. So maybe you do have a product that you develop and you do have versions, you'll be versioning it, and so you want to break it up into versions. And within that version, you want to break it up into sprints. That's definitely something you can do. In today's example, I'll just go ahead and create that later on. So I'm going to create the Star Killer project folder. And when I select the project folder, there's nothing in here. There's no work items, no tickets, no wiki pages, no nothing. So that's exactly how I expect it to be. But I do want to go ahead and begin creating my first item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one item, just one item, because it's going to give me some visibility into how this project folder is going to work. I'll be relying on many of the default settings that are here in Axosoft. However, in this example, when I create this one item, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at our field templates. What do they look like when I add an item, when I edit an item, when I view an item? Is there a way I can change this? And then from there, I'll talk about custom fields. Do I want to create custom fields? Where would I go? How would I create them? So those are things that I will examine. And then finally, I want to take a look at my workflow. Maybe I won't make all the changes that I want to have in it today, but I will take a look and just get a brief overview of how things look, just so I have a good expectation of what to expect for when my team members start moving items through the workflow. So let's go ahead and do that. To add an item, it's really simple. You have the option to either just click the Add button. If you click the drop-down menu next to the Add button, you get the Quick Add or the Full Add. The Quick Add will just take you to this section here where you only enter the fields that are required. And in my case, this is our first item, that's the title. And I also require the work item type, and so this is a default field that is included in any new hosted account. We break up your work items into these different work item types. These can be customized, and I'm going to leave this as a user story and save and close. So we have our first item, which we will use to take a look at a few other things that are here within this project folder. So before you start adding more items, let's go ahead and get grounded and figure out what's already configured here in this Star Killer project folder. The first thing I want to look at is the field template. So I have this item selected. I'm going to click Edit, and I'll be taken to what we call in Axosoft the field template. Field template is just a collection of different fields like title or description assigned to. All of these collectively become the field template. I am assuming that you have either administrator permissions or most of the permissions granted in Axosoft, and if you are that person, then you should see this gear in the upper right corner. I went really fast there, so here it is again, upper right corner. I'm going to click this gear, and this is the field template editor. This field template's name is starter field template. It is the default field template that comes with Axosoft, and it includes fields like title, work item type, workflow step. You may decide that you don't need all of these fields to be displayed when adding, viewing, or editing items. If that's the case, then I encourage you to make some modifications to this field template. So one thing I'll do, for example, is take out priority. And let's see if we can add a field here. Let's add status. A few quick notes. If you wish to set default values for your field template, you can always do so by just pre-selecting an option here. If it's a list value, you can just select a value and it will default to this value when you create an item. And so to be more specific, say I wanted to create a brand new field template and it would be for the first workflow step. That's where setting default values through the field template might be useful. But then the workflow also gives you the ability to set default values, and I'll get to that soon here. For now, I will leave status clear. I'm happy with this overall selection here. And I'm next going to examine my custom fields. Because I'm already here in this field template editor, there's actually a shortcut here in the upper left corner where I can add a custom field. Let's say that there is a custom field that I wish to include here. Maybe it's an additional comments field, and I'll just be really explicit and say this is just a custom comments field. I'm going to make this a comments field type, and I'm going to include it in all of my existing field templates, and I'm also going to add it to the details panel. You don't have to select these options if you don't want them displayed, if you only just want them to exist in the database. Here they are. So here it is down here at the bottom, the custom comments. Why might I want this custom comments field? Well, there might be comments that you wish to make internally. Some teams have the help desk module, which includes the customer portal, and they still want their customer contacts to make comments on items that they have access to, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want the customer contact to see the internal conversation you're having. So this is a great way for me to expose work items to the customer portal, have an internal comment section just for my team, while keeping the generic comments field open to any customer contact and team members, so it's more public. So that's just one use case there, but you get the idea of how you could create a custom field. Okay, so here's our first item. I examined our field template. I added a custom field down here at the bottom. I'm happy with that for now. So the idea here is that now that you know how to modify your field template and you know how to modify your custom fields, go ahead and take your time, build that out how you need. Remember, you can create multiple custom fields. You can create multiple field templates if you're on the fully featured version. And once you've done that, you're ready to examine your workflow. Workflow is the last thing I want to examine before I start creating more items. If you notice, there's a drop-down menu here in the toolbar that lets you move the item to a different workflow step. So I can move this to approved, in progress, or any of the other steps. And since I'm the administrator, I have access to this last option, manage workflow. Before I jump to that, you can also access this same menu by going to Tools, Other Settings, Workflows. This is a quick way to see if you have permission to access this. If it's grayed out, you don't have permission and you'll have to talk to your Axosoft administrator. And here I have all the workflows in Axosoft. So this is the work items workflow. It's the default Scrum workflow, so it has a new, approved, in progress, exactly what I expected. And I can even take a look at my tickets workflow. I won't be diving into the tickets workflow in this video, but know that this is where it is. Do you like these workflow steps? Are these too many? Are these too few? These are questions you need to ask yourself, and this will guide you in the actions that you'll take based off the answers to those questions. So for example, here I have the new workflow step. Let me take a look at it. Is new the right name? Even something as simple as that will help. If you already have a workflow that your team is familiar with, make it easier for them and name it something similar so that the transition is easier for them when they start using Axosoft. There's also a fancy, feature here, and it's the associated field template. So earlier, we were talking about the different field templates that you can create in Axosoft. And I'm going to go back and show you the project field template, but know that you can set a field template for every single workflow step. Here's the starter field template I had earlier, and I can select that, or it's actually already being used, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But what if I wanted to create a field template that was only for items that were in the new workflow step? Why might I want to do that? What if I only want to show users 3 fields, title, description, attachments, when an item is new? Just to clear up any confusion, make it as easy as possible for them. I could create a new field template, so I have the shortcut here, manage field templates. I could create another field template, call this the new workflow step template, and let's take out some of these fields here and I'll fast forward here in the video. Okay, so I've removed most of those fields. I left project just because I want to give users the ability to change the project. But I'm pretty happy with this, and I'm going to save my changes. So let's close out. And here we are again at the new workflow step. I believe it has to refresh real quick here, so let's exit and then go back in. Here it is. And I have the new workflow step template is ready to go. So what this tells Axosoft is that whenever an item lands in the new workflow step, instead of showing that starter field template I had earlier, go ahead and use this one instead. And so if I save my changes and allow Axosoft to refresh, let's create our second item just so that you see what I mean. I'm going to click Add, and here it is, a very simple field template with only a handful of fields. So let's call this my second item. One thing you'll notice, however, is at the moment that I move this to the second workflow step, and I go back to Edit, I have returned to the project default field template. And the way that I know that is, I see all the other fields are included, and if I were to click this gear in the upper right corner, I see the name of this field template is the starter field template. Okay. So going back to what I promised you, where is that configured? Where is that set? This is set at the project level. If I go here to the Organize panel and edit the Start Killer project, and let's jump here. Here under Field Templates, I can see what the default field template is for the project folder. If you don't change anything, Axosoft will just let you use the defaults. If you do want to make a change, you can select the field template that you wish to apply to the project folder. So here I have the 2 that I created earlier. For now, I'll just leave it to inherit. I'm pretty happy with my selection. And know that the same general idea applies to the workflow. So earlier, you and I were editing the workflow for this project folder, and it was using the default Scrum workflow. Now, I only have one workflow in this system right now, but you could imagine that if you created another workflow, if your account supports multiple workflows, then you can create as many as you want, and you can associate each unique workflow to a unique project folder. So it's one of the powerful things about Axosoft. You can have multiple workflows, and you can set a workflow for each project folder. And then once you have that selection, you can set specific actions based off of what happens when a new item is created, where does it go. If you're moving an item from a project folder that has the same workflow associated to it, would you like to keep it in the same workflow step, or do you want it to always jump to a different workflow step? So again, I will leave this as inherits. I will save my changes. And let's briefly summarize what we've done so far. So we've created a project folder, we've created our first item, and we have used our first item to examine the field templates, the custom fields, and the workflow in Axosoft. We can always go back and reevaluate the settings that we have for all three of those, but this forms a great foundation for what we're about to do next. You could populate the rest of your project folder with items manually, one at a time. So this is how I created my first item. Our second item, I just hit the add button and filled in the details. Or if you already have a spreadsheet, a .csv file of items that have some details all succinctly put together, you can use our importer to get those items into Axosoft. So let's do that. We're going to Tools, Utilities, Import Data. I already have a .csv file, so when I go to choose the file, and I'm going to my desktop, here it is. Just some work items that I've put together. Here they are. I get a quick preview of what they look like. So I can click Next, and this is where I go and map my fields. In my case, the CSV file I have does have some columns that will map one-to-one. So here I have all the column names in my .csv file. Let's take a quick look, see what I can map over. So I do want to keep title. So let's look down here. Here's title. And I don't want to keep project folder. I actually want to move everything to the Star Killer project folder. I don't want to move it to a release. I'll just let it set to all releases there. Let's see if I can enable the show all fields, because there might be something here that I do want to keep, and that's the remaining estimate value. So let's migrate the remaining estimate value as it is in the spreadsheet. Okay, I know there's more. Well, we could do work item type too. Let's do that as well. So I could pre-populate these more, but I have enough data to work with this. One last thing I will do is I'm going to set the priority, and I'm going to default this. So here it is, priority. I'm just going to default it to medium. Okay, that's good. So Axosoft confirms you are about to import this many items. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I'm pretty happy with my selection. I'm pretty confident here. So it'll import my items. It's calculating. Okay, and here are all my items. They're all orange because I have default them to the medium priority, so that's why they have that color. But look at that, they pre-populated quite nicely. They have some remaining estimate values, some have 0, some have a non-zero value. Okay, so now we're getting to the next part of we just created our project folder, but what about the grooming process? So if you are someone who adheres to some of the approaches in Agile, you likely have grooming that you wish to perform before items are ready to be assigned to a release. Whether or not you decide to create a specific project folder for grooming is up to you. What I've seen some teams do, so here I am in Star Killer, they like to break up their project folder into different subcomponents, and some of those even include a backlog folder, for example. So if you wanted to start populating this backlog with items that you are grooming, some teams even use a unique workflow for their backlog. It could be as simple as new, rejected, accepted. Those could be all the workflow steps, and the moment it moves to approved, Maybe you reassign it to a different project folder so that it's ready to be assigned to a release. So all of that is up to you. In my case, I'm keeping things simple and I'm only keeping things in Starkiller. The same principles will apply if you decide to use a different project folder for your backlog. So the main thing that I'm going to do here is I have the option to jump to list view, card view, and rank view. Okay, let's do this one. Let's do rank mode. And you'll be introduced to the Axosoft ranking, the stack rank feature that we have here in the system. It's purely positional. Whatever item you take and drag and drop over to the ranked section, once an item moves to the ranked section, it has been ranked. Any items that are in the unranked section are equally unranked. So it doesn't matter if 40 is way above 21. In Axosoft's eyes, 21 equals 40 from the stack rank point of view. However, if I wanted to take 31 and rank it above 39, because 31 is positioned above 39, then this is considered, item 31 is considered of higher rank than item 39. Let's do a few more things here. I'm going to return to list view. And what I want to do is just take a few items and let's actually assign or make 31 the parent item for these 3 items I've selected. So that's good there. Let's return to rank mode. And the reason I did this is because I also want to show you that while you can't take 23 and unrank 23 or rank 23 against 39 but not the other items in here, you can rank the child items against one another. So that's something that you can do, and it's just a drag and drop, just a simple drag and drop. If you have many items and scrolling becomes a little cumbersome, I suggest just right-clicking and you can move it to the bottom rank or the top rank. So let's do that. Let's move this to the bottom rank. So 25 has been moved to the bottom of my ranked section. I can then go ahead and position it as needed from here. Similarly, if you right-click on a ranked item, you can unrank it just by right-clicking and jumping to the unrank option. And there it is. It's been unranked. It's down there with the others. A few things to note. What about priority? What's the difference between priority and ranking? They're separate. Priority is a field. It has, in my case, I only have medium, low, high. They correspond to the green for low, orange for medium, red for high. And ranking is purely positional. You communicate what the rank is by sorting by rank. If I return to list view and I apply the sort by rank sort here in this option, then Axosoft will automatically honor the sort that I have set in rank, and any user can actually access this sort. So maybe only one person has the permission to rank items, but everyone else can see what that person has decided just by clicking the sort by rank option. What this allows you to do is groom the backlog. You're determining, if you're the product owner, for example, this is you telling the development team, hey, this is the order that these items should be done, or this is the order of business value. And maybe dev can use the priority field to determine which ones they should tackle first, or vice versa, right? You can decide how you want to use that. There is one last thing I want to show you before I jump into planning your releases. You can also take advantage of your filters to make ranking a little easier. So if we jump back to rank mode, right now I only have items that are selected in the Starkiller project folder selected. However, I could choose to also apply filters on top of this view. So maybe I want to only show items that are not completed. I don't know if that I had any items that were completed in here, but you get the idea. Say I had maybe 10 items that were completed. Well, those will get cleared out because they're not up for consideration. I don't want to consider them for my upcoming release. They've already been done. Let's only show what I need to see here in rank mode so that when my users sort by rank, they can easily identify which items are up for a release. Alright, so speaking of releases, let's go ahead and create our first release and also start using the release planner. Back in the Organize panel, I have the Releases pane. I'm going to jump back to List View here on the right side, and then I've applied my sort by rank, so that looks good. You can decide how you want to create releases. I find that it's easier to create it from the Organize panel, but it is possible to create it from the Release Planner. The way that you would create a release, and let's do this. So I'm going to collapse the Death Star example. This is just the sample data that came included with my account. I might choose to delete this altogether. For now, I'm going to create a fresh release, and I will call this April release. And I'll do a 2-week iteration here. So now you know when I'm making this video, fun fact there. So that's April here, happy spring. And this will be a 2-week sprint that starts at the, let's go back. This is, here we go, April 14th. So this will span the first 2 weeks of April. And so here I have it, and I've just called it the April release. You can call it something much more specific. Maybe you actually want to say the dates. So the April 4th to the April 14th, or April 3rd to the April 14th release, Sprint 1, version 1, whatever you want to call it. From Axosoft's point of view, Axosoft just needs a start and due date for it to start calculating your projected ship, the burn down data, which is what gives you the projected ship date, the velocity, and some of these other important metrics. So before the release planner existed, all users would do at this point would be to select items that they wish to include in their releases, and then they would drag and drop them over from right to left. So I'm not going to complete that operation because I do notice that I'm actually missing some information here. Let me drag and drop this column over. This is the remaining estimate column, which tells me how much time has been estimated, and in this, because I imported some of these items, this is how much time was left on them. In my example, let's say that I know that each of these items actually have some work still left to be done. We recommend that you always have a non-zero remaining estimate value when assigning items over to a release. The burn down chart uses the remaining estimate value to build the data. Without a remaining estimate value, you will get no data in the burn down chart. So that's why it's super important that you at least have a non-zero remaining estimate value, unless you purposely know that you just want to add this to a release for some other reason. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to cheat. I'm performing a multi-edit. I'm just going to estimate that all of these items have 10 hours left. You can, of course, meticulously go into each item, talk to your dev team, talk to the stakeholders, people who know how long something will actually take. Please do that. In my case, I'm just demonstrating that once I have estimated each of these items, it will have a value in the remaining estimate column for each item. Because this is a child and parent relationship here, all the children's estimates will roll up to the parent. So that's why it says, so here's 10, 20, 30, and the parent item itself also has 10 hours estimated against it. So that gets included in the total. If I wanted to avoid that completely, what I can do here is, let's use the keyboard shortcut D. So here's what I mean here. So I hit Shift question mark, and I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut D to edit this item's remaining estimate. And I'm going to set it to 0. I'm going to zero it out for both. So 0 hours there, and 0 hours here. Okay, and that updates my total. So the reason I did that is because maybe I only want my sub-items to drive the grand total for the parent. And if that's the case, this is what you would need to do. Okay, but let's say you've already added your team members and you want to see how much time they can realistically take on in the next 2 weeks. And you want to assign as much work as possible based off of what they can take. So that's where you would use the Axosoft release planner. So here I have it already, but it's available as a built-in tab. Here it is in the release planner, but I'll just jump to it. In the release planner, so here I have sprint 1 already selected, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the April sprint, and there should be nothing in here, which is exactly what I would expect. Now, I have 2 other team members who will be working with me, and they are, for fun, I'll just use the built-in users here, so it's Darth Vader and Admiral Piet. and they have 36 hours and 80 hours of capacity available. So one question that you might have is, well, how does Axosoft calculate what this user's capacity is? So here's how it starts. So we start with the start date and the due date. We need both of these because we're time boxing the release, and once we have a set number of days that the release will be active, that's what we use to help calculate your capacity. If you were to edit any given user, this is part of their user options section, but they have a capacity section, and here's how many days a week they work and how many hours a day they work. Each day they work 8 hours a day. That's the default value, and you can change that. And each user can also set their own individual vacation days. So this is how they would do it. Or if you knew, for example, Easter's coming up and you wanted to clear out a specific day, you can go ahead and do so, and that'll update the release for everyone. Here, in this example, Admiral Piet is actually already assigned to already has work assigned in other releases. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to remove him just because I don't want to interfere with what he's doing just yet. Let me add myself. Okay, so I have those hours available there. And let's add him back in just to see how that looks now. Okay, so the reason I took Admiral Piet out and then put him back in is because Axosoft always auto-calculates how much time this user has available based off of the moment that you add them in. So when you add them in, Axosoft will calculate, okay, these are the other releases that are currently active. And if you saw, I actually did have some other releases active. And there's one that's overlapping with one that Admiral Piet has work assigned to. So based off of that, Axosoft will do its best to tell you, okay, based off of the work that's left on his plate for that other release, you could realistically assign this user about 30 hours of work, and they would be able to handle both loads of work for the duration of both sprints. In my case and in Darth Vader's case, we both have, we're open 100% for the duration of this release. So what I can do next is I can start assigning work over to this release. So here I have April release. Okay, there's nothing in here. Just checking my filters there. Okay, so let's assign this item over to myself. So those 30 hours consume my capacity. So the remaining estimate value is what consumes your capacity. Let's do something similar for Darth Vader. So let's assign some items over to Darth Vader. And you can start to see how the remaining estimate values are driving the capacity's consumption. So as you start assigning items, are you over allocating anyone? If you do over allocate something to someone, go ahead and give it to someone else, or adjust or reevaluate if you need to break an item up further into different pieces of work. There's different ways that you can respond to over allocation. You can add team members, you can change the scope of the release. Those are all questions that you will have to decide on an iteration by iteration basis. But hopefully Axosoft here will give you an idea of how to get that information really quickly. So once the release has started, you really don't need the release planner anymore, and your team members can get to work. Your team members on a day-to-day basis, let's go to one of my saved tabs here. So I have my items as a saved tab that I'm going to use, and here are all the items that I am responsible for across more than one release, but it looks like this is just the one release that I've been working on, that I've just been assigned work to. If this were me, I could just use this to know what I need to do next. What you can recommend your users do is, if they're more visual, have them switch over to the card view. And then they can begin moving items through the workflow as they actually perform work. So at this stage, everything's been approved, for example. That might be something that was done ahead of time. I'm just going to jump them all to approved. And as I'm performing work, perhaps I did a half day's worth of work here. What I can do is right click and add a work log. Say this is 4 hours, and each day each team member is going through and performing all of these work logs. And what this does is this contributes to your release's burn down chart. So if I go back here to the release planner, and this time I'm going to select the April release. That's going to update a few things for me. Let's take a look. So this will build the first burn down chart. So it hasn't started yet, first of all, but you start to see how it's been set up and it's ready to go. I actually performed a work log today, which is not realistic. I probably would have performed a work log, say, next Tuesday, but you get the idea here. The burn down chart is building based off of the sum of all the remaining estimates in your all the remaining estimate values for the items associated to your release. As your team members log work logs throughout the sprint, and so they're all scattered, right? Your burn down chart will update and slowly burn down towards zero. This trend is what we use to calculate the velocity, and this is what we use to calculate your projected ship date. As an example, I'm going back to my generic work items tab, and let's go back to the default data here that was here initially. I think sprint 1 for version 1 is the one I want for all projects. And we'll do this here. Oh, and let's take out my filter. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to click the Show Charts option here. And this is the burn down chart. So this is again the default data, but this started a while ago. And if I were to log a work log today for this item that's in progress, for example, let's do one that's really dramatic. This work log updates today's burn down chart, the burn down bar for the burn down chart. It updated my velocity and my projected ship date. So all of these values are collecting together to give me this data. You can also see this data in the dashboard. So if I jump over to the dashboard, I'm going to be using the sample data just because it has some interesting information there. Let's recreate the burn down chart. So here I click the plus icon. I'm dragging and dropping that burn down chart over here. I'm going to uncheck the Use Global Dashboards feature here. I'm just going to select Sprint 1 from version 2. And it should recreate the burn down chart that we saw earlier. So here it is. So what I recommend for the burn down chart is, or for the dashboard, is include data that you wish to see. What do you want to show others? What do you want to see visually? You can recreate what you were seeing earlier with that Show Charts shortcut, but you can also include some additional data points. So here, for example, I have the 2 major dashboard gadgets that we were using previously. I'm going to delete a few others. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to this gear, I'm going to dashboard settings, and I will set my default here to be sprint 1. So what that does is it'll update this item chart in particular, which is showing me how many items, how many user stories I have in this release versus how many bugs versus how many epics. But these could easily be how many tasks. It just depends on what you've assigned and what you've seen. But it's a nice good spread. And if I click on one, I can even see, let's take a look here. Let's edit this first. I'm going to make it more interesting. I'm going to group by assigned to, and I want to see what workflow step it's in. So here it is, sprint 1, all projects, it's a pie chart, I'm getting a count. So here I see all 3 users. If I click on the Admiral, I see that this user has 2 items in approved and 1 in progress. So you can start to see how you can build out this dashboard to be useful supporting information to answer those questions of who's doing what's our projected ship date, is there any scope change that's affecting my projected ship date, what's our velocity. These are all good questions that Axosoft can help you answer. So hopefully this was helpful for you. We talked about creating your first project folder, what you can check first before you start creating more items in your project, how you can then groom the backlog to get some information about what items should be done first. And then once those items have been created and groomed and estimated, you can start assigning them over to the release. You can assign items either directly just by dragging and dropping them over to the release here in the Organize panel, or you can use the Release Planner to get an idea of how much time each user who will be working in Axosoft on the release has available. And then once work has started, your team members are moving items through a workflow. Let's be more visual here. So card view, let's jump away from the charts. They're moving items through the workflow. They're logging work logs. And all of that is contributing to the data that you see here in the dashboard. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and we'll see you in the next video.